Hello! Welcome back to another episode of Mr. Ringer's Neighborhood. Now, if you'll notice, I do have my trusty new World War II M42 gas mask that we all have, all of you. You got it in your apocalypse package that I sent out, so make sure you use that gas mask. If that hasn't gotten to your house yet, just keep waiting. It'll get there, I promise. Yeah, CDC says make sure you keep 2 gas masks on you. That's just rule of thumb. So make sure you have those. Hey, guess what we get to talk about this week? China, right? Can you believe this is the week that we actually have scheduled to talk about China? Isn't that crazy? I can't believe it, but it's true. We get to talk about China. We get to talk. They're in the news. You've probably been hearing a lot about China. You've probably been seeing a lot about China. But we're going to talk about China. We're not really going to talk about the current situation of things. We're going to talk about past and present, and their geography, their people, their culture, their history. But it is interesting that they are so hot in the news right now because of all things considered. But China is diverse. It's big. It has the largest population in the world. Over a billion people. I think it's like 1.5 billion, 1.6 billion. So an absolutely massive population, and it's very diverse. It's very very densely populated, and they have a very diverse landform as well because it's a huge country. It's the 4th largest country in the world, just behind us in terms of total land area, and they're number 1 in population. So China has very diverse landforms. China's rapidly growing economy has changed in recent years. Now, the thing about China as well is that it has very, very cold areas, very, very hot areas, temperate areas. I mean, it's big, and a lot of people. It's very diverse. Their economy is big. Now, this is also the first country that we're going to talk about this year, and one of the only countries left that have a government system called communism, right? No, yeah, they are a communist country, but but what does that mean, right? We use that word all the time. You might have heard the word communist, right? He's a communist. She's a communist. You're being a communist, right? But what does that mean? Well, we will talk about communism in China and what it means to them and what communism means. So more to come on that. There is only 4 countries left in the world that are communist. China is the largest and most powerful, most influential of those 4. But the most famous one that was communist throughout history is no longer communist. It was the Soviet Union, also known as Russia. Now, they are not currently communist, but they have been historically. China is the largest, most influential communist country left in the world today. So we'll talk about communism and what that means and what that's all about. So it has very diverse landforms, very rapidly growing economy, changed in recent years. Your terms: dike, fault, communist state, consumer goods. Those are your terms that you will need to look up and know. We're going to talk about these. A dike is a dam. It's an earthwork that prevents rivers from overflowing and flooding certain areas. A fault is a crack in the earth's surface. Communist state is the type of government that China has where everything is shared and owned communally by the government and by the property, the businesses, the factories. Everything's owned by the government and everything is supposedly shared by the workers for the communal good, hence the name communism. We'll talk about communism. It's different. And then consumer goods, things that you buy simply because you want it, right? A consumer good is something that you're going to buy because you want to have that thing. Consumer products, consumer goods, things you buy for your own personal, your own personal good. So let's get into it. Look at this thing. It's the national symbol of China. What is it? It's a panda, right? An endangered species found in China. Everyone knows what pandas are, right? Everybody's seen pandas before. Kung Fu Panda. It is their national identity, their national animal, like the United States, is the bald eagle. The national animal, the national symbol of China is the panda bear. Isn't that cute? So China's landscape. So 1/3 of China is covered by mountains. The Himalaya, the Kunlun Shan, the Tian Shan, and the Altai Mountains are all in China in different areas. These are 4 different mountain ranges that you can find in China, spread out. These are huge mountains as well. I mean, we know the Himalaya are huge, but the other ones as well. And these are some of the most isolated places on Earth. You can walk for weeks in the Tian Shan Mountain and never see a town, a village, or a road. Places that are still largely unexplored and largely wild to this day can be found in many of these mountain ranges. The plateau of Tibet is in southwestern China. It is the world's largest plateau, located. It's in China. It used to be an independent country. Tibet was a kingdom all the way up until the 1950s, when China invaded and took over it and put it into, made it part of China. It was ruled over by a religious leader. The religious leader of all of Buddhism, his name is the Dalai Lama, and he's kind of like the Pope of Buddhism, kind of, if you want to think of it like that, but he was also the leader of the nation known as Tibet. Tibet is part of China today. And it's called the roof of the world because the average elevation of Tibet is like 14,000 feet above sea level, which is like the highest mountains in the United States. This is the average height of Tibet. Think about that. The average, walking around, just walking, talking to your friends in a city, 14,000 feet above sea level, that's way up there, right? So that's what they call the rooftop of the world. So its height averages about 14,800 feet above sea level. So that's, again, way up there. Then you've got, in contrast, the Turpan Depression. So they also have areas that are like 500 feet below sea level. So it's a very diverse country. You've got areas that are super, super high up, areas that are actually below sea level, and then everything in between. The Taklamakan Desert is an isolated region with very, very high temperatures, so you can get very, very hot in the Taklamakan Desert, the Gobi Desert. Sandstorms here can last for days and create huge shifting sand dunes like we've seen in the Sahara, right? Those ergs we saw in the Sahara and the Namib in Africa and all that. Well, same thing. China has deserts. China has a huge desert called the Taklamakan. They also have another one, it's a rocky desert called the Gobi. And there it is. The further east is another desert called the Gobi. Instead of sand, the Gobi has rocks and stones. Interesting thing about Gobi, too, is that a lot of times compasses and different navigational equipment won't work in the Gobi because a lot of the rocks and the minerals that are found in the Gobi are magnetic, and they can influence all these instruments, and a compass might just do this in the Gobi Desert. So, it's one of those kind of mind-blowing places where compasses won't work, and it's very easy to get lost, and it's very hot, and it's very dry, and Gobi Desert. It's on the border between China and Mongolia. About 90% of China's people live on the country's fertile eastern plains. Most of the people, 90% of 1.6 billion people, live in one area. That's nuts, right? Talk about crowded. Maybe this, talking about what we're talking about, with the virus that started in Wuhan, you're talking about where people live in China, there's a ton of people. So the spread of something like an infectious disease, like a virus or something like that, is going to take off very, very rapidly because all the people are in constant contact with one another. They're all very, very densely populated, densely crowded together. 90% of 1.6 billion people all live in one area. That's a lot of people. 2 of the largest cities and manufacturing areas are Beijing and Shanghai. Beijing is the capital, you need to know that, and Shanghai is another one of these very, very large cities. These cities, populations are like millions, 20 million people live in these cities. It's very common in China to have populations of 10 million in a city. 15 million, 12 million, it's nuts. So there's 3 major rivers you need to know about in China. There's 3 major rivers, major waterways. The Yangtze, the Yellow, and the Xi. Xi? That's X-I. How do you say that? I know. Chinese speak a different language. And the Chinese language, the largest language spoken, most common language is called Mandarin. Another language that is widely spoken in the South is called Cantonese, but Mandarin is very different than our language. A lot of the sounds that you'll find in Mandarin are not sounds that we have in English, which is why it's hard to replicate for us. 2 of the hardest languages to learn in the world are Mandarin and English, and these 2 languages do not go well together. So it's very hard for them to learn English, and it's very hard for us to learn Mandarin, and because the languages are just so different. There's so much that they don't have in common. And that's the biggest thing is obviously the sounds that we make. They have a lot of sounds that we don't have, and we have a lot of sounds that they don't have, which makes it difficult for them to say certain sounds. Things like R's, right, are hard in other languages, which is why when they speak, sometimes their accents in English don't have their R's or don't have their L's, because those are letters that they don't have in their language. So it's hard for them to start making it. Just like if you were to start speaking, Chinese, Mandarin, it would be very difficult for you to produce some of their sounds. So she is the closest I think that's supposed to be pronounced. But again, I don't speak Mandarin, so I'm probably just absolutely destroying that. But so they have those wind through the highlands and the plains. So they serve as important transportation routes and also a source of soil. Just like in other places we talked about, this is where their civilization started, about 3,000 years ago. So soil being deposited when these rivers overflow once a year is both a blessing and a curse. The soil, the flooding causes the soil to be spread out, which makes the land more fertile, but it also destroys a lot. So in recent years, they've built dams, obviously. In modern times, they built dams to stop the destruction that is caused by these floods, but what do you lose in the process? The soil being deposited back on the land, right? So it's kind of like a double-edged sword. It's kind of like a blessing and a curse. These same thing we talked about in Egypt, right? When the Nile would flood. So to control floods, the Chinese have built dams and dikes or high banks of soil along the rivers to try and prevent this from happening, prevent this flooding. Eastern China lies along a fault or a crack in the Earth's crust. It's on what we call the Pacific Ring of Fire, the Pacific Rim, where there is tons of earthquakes, volcanic activity, seismic activity, all that kind of stuff. And China experiences a lot of earthquakes. Earthquakes in this region are common and can be very, very violent. We don't really have to worry about earthquakes here in Eatonton, Georgia, right? The biggest earthquake we have kind of maybe would just feel like, oh, would you feel it? This sounded like a big truck just drove by. All right, but in China, they can actually shake buildings down. They can crack open roads. They can have buildings and bridges collapse. So it can be very, very bad in China, kind of like in California or somewhere like that, except I believe they're actually worse in China in terms of total destruction. So discussion and questions. How are the Yangtze, Yellow, and the Xi rivers a source of soil? We talked about this. What is it? Just said it. That's right. For centuries, these rivers have flooded in the banks in the spring. The floodwaters have deposited rich soil that form these flat river basins and make them very farmable. What's the main crop? What is, just off the top of your head, not knowing a lot about China, what is the main crop that has made them successful over the years? Their number one cash crop, number one thing that has allowed Chinese farmers and Chinese people to be successful. What is it? You're a genius. Rice, right? Rice is the number one thing. They're the number one producer of rice. Everyone knows this about China, right? Rice is their number one thing. But economics changed in 1949 for China. Okay? China adopted communism after a long fight, after a long series of wars, a civil war which led into World War II, which led back into a civil war. The nationalist forces that were not communists were defeated by the communists. The government in China has strong control over the economy and society as a whole. All businesses, all farms, all factories, the government has strict control over. This is what communism is. The idea of communism is that everything will be shared and everything will be equal so that no one will be impoverished and no one will be super rich. The problem is with that is that in order for you to join into that and be a part of that society, they're going to have to take away your rights, right? Because in order for this to work, you have to voluntarily surrender your business and your rights and your freedoms to the government in hopes that the government will take care of everybody, right? It's a great idea in theory where it's like, oh, well, everyone's going to be equal and everyone's going to share everything and everything. The government will control and there won't be any unhappiness. There won't be any poverty. Problem being is that it never works out. These communist countries always slip into authoritarianism, meaning like the government becomes very, very strict. You have dictators that take control, and you have these leaders that take all the power, and the party, they don't have any freedoms for the people, and the people just have to suffer at the hands of a government that now is poor and mismanaged, and everyone suffers because of this. Now, China actually has been largely successful in this, because though that they adopted communism as their form of government to control the people, they have adopted capitalism in terms of making money. So they call it one party, two systems. China is completely ruled by the Communist Party, but they allow their people to make a little bit of money and allow consumer goods. So they're trying to play the best of both worlds in China, which has led them to be very, very successful in terms of making money, because the government still has complete control of whatever they want to do, they do. But the people now also have the ability to make money, and businesses to make money and trade with the outside world, which has led to China being able to grow and grow and grow. Now, the government also, having complete control, can decide what the whole country is going to do like that, right? I mean, they can just change their whole policy as soon as they want, and they can adapt with the market. So in a lot of ways, China is doing very, very well economically because of their complete control over the citizens, complete control over all the businesses, and complete control over everyone. It's bad for the people, but so in recent years, China's leaders have begun many changes to make the economy stronger. The government has allowed many features from the free enterprise system, our system, to take hold, right? So as a result, China's economy has boomed. They have a massive labor force, lots of people who need jobs, bring in factories, put all the people to work, produce a bunch of stuff, sell it, and keep all the money for themselves, right? That's the Chinese government's policy. It's working out pretty well for them. Bad for the people, though. So China has asked other countries to invest or put money into Chinese businesses. Many American companies have taken their factories over to China, right? And a lot of your goods are made in China. Just look at your shoes, right? Look at your shoes or your book bag, or look at your shirt or whatever you're wearing right now. I guarantee you something that you're wearing is made in China, right? We all know this. Many companies in China are now jointly owned by Chinese and foreign business people. So some of these companies are actually owned by, Chinese and American. Like they're jointly owned, so that everyone benefits. Foreign companies expect two benefits from investing in China. So two things that they're hoping for if they invest in China. First, that they can pay Chinese workers less than they would have to pay workers in their own country. So a company like let's say Nike wants to make money. Nike. They want to make more money. Well, one thing they're going to do is they need to cut costs, right? So like if they want to make more money, they need to pay their workers less. If they pay their workers less, then they can make more money from what they're doing. So if it takes them, if they can produce a pair of shoes for $10 and they can sell it for $150, all that $140 that that now that there is going to be profit, because they don't necessarily have to pay their workers that much. Because in the United States, the workers are going to demand a little bit more. They're going to demand certain rights. They're going to demand certain privileges. There'll be fair wages. They're going to demand fair working hours. In China, if you don't like it, guess what? You don't have a choice, right? You can either have a job or not have a job. If you don't like that you're getting paid $1 a day, then you're fired. We're bringing somebody else in. There's somebody else of the 1.6 billion people waiting outside that need a job. Come on in. You've got a job now. So this is part of the problem in China, and this is part of the dark side of this this whole system. Second, though, companies in China have hundreds of millions of possible customers, so they also can sell their products though back to China. So now China is open up for business. So not only can they produce all their goods in China and make them cheaper and pay their workers less, now they can also take those same products and sell them back to the workers, sell them back to the people. So it's both a market and a booming area to get workers and produce your goods. So you can sell them and you can make them. So yeah. As a result of economic growth, more Chinese now enjoy a good standard of living. So actually, this has kind of brought up a lot of the people, giving more and more jobs to all these Chinese people, making these businesses more and more successful, means that the people can make more money and they can have a better standard of living. They can afford consumer goods, which are just things that you want, things that aren't necessarily necessities. Think like televisions, cars, motorcycles, computers, iPhones, nice pair of shoes, jacket, hat, all, stuff that's not necessarily necessity, but that you just want, right? Things that you want because you just want it. The United States is all about consumer goods. We are addicted to consumer goods, right? That's like who we are, what we do, right? The ads that are constantly being flooded at you, like, hey, buy this, you want this, you'll be happier if you have this, right? Consumer goods. Not all Chinese people though enjoy prosperity. There's tons of poverty in China. I wanted to paint this picture like it's all great in China. It's not. There is lots of poverty still. There's a lot of problems in terms of inequality, in terms of not only wealth inequality, but also just like inequality among the people. A lot of people live in absolute poverty. A lot of people have no rights. Obviously, in terms of freedom, we have way more political freedoms than they do in China. You cannot speak out against the government. You can't in China. You can't criticize leadership. You really can't even vote against the leadership. Most times in elections in communist countries, you just have you vote, but you vote. Your only option is one option. You can vote for the person who's in charge or not. And if you vote against the person, then that's probably going to hurt you in the long run as well, because now they know that you didn't vote for them. So now they can keep track of you troublemaker, right? This is especially true when we get to North Korea. China's a little bit softer on their hardcore communism than North Korea is. And North Korea is extremely authoritarian and controlling in terms of their people. And it's a bizarre place, so you'll have fun with that. We'll get there. So cities like Hong Kong and Macau were once controlled by European countries. Hong Kong was controlled by the United Kingdom. Macau was controlled by Portugal. These were individual little city-states that were controlled as colonies until the 1990s, where they were given back to China. China, seeing how well they were being run and seeing how much money they were making, basically said, we're going to create a special policy for you. We're going to own you, and we're going to basically get all the money that you're making, but we're going to leave you alone. So in Hong Kong, in Macau, they have totally different governments. They have totally different laws, police forces, rights, abilities. Even though they're the same country as China, they operate as different countries in a way. It's like they have a totally different system. And that's because when China took them over or got them back from Great Britain and Portugal, they were doing so well, China basically said, we're just going to keep it going the way that it was, act like nothing changed, but instead of Great Britain and Portugal getting all your money, now it's just going back to us. And Hong Kong is actually in the center of kind of like a revolution right now going on, protesting against Chinese getting more and more control in Hong Kong, and the people of Hong Kong do not like it. So that's going on right now in Hong Kong. China regained control of Hong Kong in 1997 and Macau in 1999. Macau is called the kind of like the Las Vegas of the East. There's a lot of things like a lot of casinos and a lot of things you can do there. It's like the Sin City of the East, I think they call it. So it's kind of like Las Vegas. And then Hong Kong is obviously a very, very successful economic place in China. Foreign countries are concerned about whether China will stand by its one country, two systems pledge, allowing Western freedoms and capitalism to exist in Hong Kong and Macau. A lot of people think that China is going to get more and more control, or want more and more control over time of Hong Kong and Macau. And we're actually starting to see that now. This started in 1997, 1999, and now here we are, 20 years later, and they are getting more and more control. And this is upsetting the people of Hong Kong. And that's the thing about the Chinese government. The Chinese government is all about complete control over everything. They want to show the idea that they are allowing more and more freedom and that life is great and great in China. But in actuality, it's all about the Chinese government's PR. They're the way they look, the way that they're portrayed. It's all about them and strength and absolute control and domination of the society. So, how has China's economic growth hurt the environment? Well, China has some of the worst pollution in the world. Smog, which is pollution that's in the air, it looks like fog, but it's actually pollution is so bad in the city of Beijing that it is the equivalent of smoking a pack of cigarettes a day if you walk around just the city of Beijing and just breathe in the air. It's the equivalent of smoking in a pack of cigarettes a day. So terrible rates of pollution, terrible rates of cancer, of all kinds of diseases, because of there's a large lack of environmental laws and regulations, because this is part of the reason why a lot of these companies come to China, is that they want to make more money by going around a lot of those laws. And it's actually cheaper to not be environmentally friendly and do the right things in terms of pollution, which is why China has had such a problem. I mean, it's really, really bad pollution in most cities in China. So many factories dump poisonous chemicals into rivers. Others burn coal, which gives off smoke that pollutes the air. This pollution leads to lung disease. The number one cause of death in China is lung disease, lung cancer. Lots of issues in China in terms of their smog and their pollution. And their rivers as well are very, very polluted. Same that we talked about in India, right? This is some differences in China, right? You've got very, very old school agrarian rice farming going on with these oxen here. This guy's plowing through fields. And then you've got this woman who's working here on looks like microchips or some kind of computer technology. So China is a place of contrast. Very, very advanced stuff, but also very, very traditional stuff as well that you will find in China. And it has been around for a long time. So that is the end of section 1. Look, more to come on that. It's kind of the crash course again. You guys make sure, check on your RenWeb, see what you're missing. Some of you are still missing some work for me from last week. Look on RenWeb, see if there's something that where there's nothing in the gradebook there. That means that you did not turn that in, or I don't have it. The best system so far that we've seen is you turning stuff into me through email. Email me any assignment that you give. Don't try and submit it through LMS. We've had some issues on LMS with people submitting stuff and then I'm not getting it, and sometimes you do submit it and I do get it. I think the best way moving forward is just for you to submit it through email. Email it to me, jringer@gatewoodschool.com. Other than that, you guys are doing well. I think we're getting the hang of it. It's getting better. So let's keep this going. And we will hopefully we'll be back in here. It's not the same without you in here. It's like I'm talking to a wall and a bunch of empty desks, because I am actually talking to a wall and a bunch of empty desks. It's not the same. It's very sad. I miss you. Hey, I hope you're having a great week and staying healthy, and miss you guys. Love you. See you later. Take care.